And I wonder if they do the unthinkable and they do a three-peat, can you put Patrick Mahomes in the echelon of Tom Brady? I mean, I already put – if you give me prime Patrick Mahomes and prime Tom Brady, I don't think there's a wrong answer there. Now, if you do the resume thing and you say, hey, Brady's got X amount of rings and these accolades and that sort of thing, well, that's what Kansas City is trying to do right now. But the one thing the Patriots never did was three-peat. And I feel like it's even harder to do it now than it was when they had opportunities to do it. And I think what's interesting about the Patriots run, and I've said this before, is, and impressive, they went a decade between, Super Bowls, if it's not for that Malcolm Butler interception.
If you look at, and you go back and do this because you enjoy doing stuff like this, go back and look at the number of offensive linemen, the number of wide receivers, the number of running backs that Tom Brady over the course of that run played with.
Yep.
It's pretty staggering. It's
okay.
Really staggering. And the different types of they were a different team with Moss and and that whole group, and then they buckle it up and we're going to run it 40 times and we're going to do it this way and then we're going to do it this way, and that will never ever be duplicated again. And
I got to push back because I feel like it could be duplicated if Andy coaches a long time and Patrick stays healthy. I think the transition from Tyreek to no Tyreek is huge. Even if you have Travis Kelce, I think the people that they've been able to win with outside the last 2 years, some of them, the pieces they've reshuffled, their offensive line. I mean, that was a dumpster fire at times last year, and they found a way to win. So while I agree with you that it would be almost impossible to duplicate it, there is one team that could.
Here's the key.
And this is the team.
I agree with you. Here's the key. And here's the question. Tom Brady had such a singular focus for 20 plus years. Chris, as you know, there's distractions, there's family, there's, life and all those things that pull at you, and justifiably so. But can Patrick sustain the focus? And, I pray that Andy can coach forever.
Yeah, me too.
I really do. I love Andy. He's one of my favorite people. We covered him in Philadelphia. We've covered him a little bit less in Kansas City because he's in the AFC and we don't get them on the air a lot. But when he was in Philadelphia, a lot. And big fan of Andy's. And, from when he was back in Green Bay and Ron Wolf was up there. And but can that duo of Andy and Pat stay together, stay healthy, stay focused? And if they can, then, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, because I think if they win 5 and they three-peat, we're putting a lot of carts before the horses here, but let's say they three-peat. That, to me, puts them in, not to me, it puts them in rare air. There's no other football team that's been able to do it, and this is in the age of free agency and player movement and that sort of thing. And on top of it, if they were able to add a couple more over the next decade and get to 5 or so, to me, it's not 7 rings against 5 rings or 6 rings against 5 rings, or, you take things individually and you compare them. And I think this run would be just as impressive if they were able to one for the thumb type thing at the end of a 10-year run from here on out. And, a lot has to go right for them, just like with other teams. If Dre Greenlaw doesn't get hurt, I don't know if they win that game, but you can point to various outcomes throughout the Patriots dynasty where you're like, yeah, that was the flip of a coin. Or something went their way, and that's what it takes to win championships.
What was the average number of points that the Patriots won their Super Bowls by? I think it was 3 or.
And Bill would tell you, it's indicative of how tight the margins are in the NFL.
Yep.
And that's the one thing about a football team is, it's not like basketball where you might look at the end of a Lakers run in the early 2000s and say there was a series like the Philly series, where it's 5 games. there's no games like that for the Patriots.
Right.
You know, whether it was beating Carolina, whether it was beating Seattle, whether it was being down 28-3. That's what makes that stuff so impressive. I wouldn't say you could take any one of those teams and say, hey, that's the best team ever.
No team was more comfortable playing under duress at the end of a game than the Patriots, because as you know, having been there, everything that's going to happen is rehearsed.
And it's predictable, the things that a game is going to hinge on, whether it's end of half, 2-minute situational football, certain metrics that a bill might be after. They just had a mastery of those margins, and I think the mastery of those margins add up to championships.
Who's comfortable in that situation? Patrick is comfortable.
Yes, he is
comfortable. And they're going to find their guys that are going to be, the young receiver came on at the end of the season and really started to show, and he's had some, I think they've had some issues there too, but somebody will step up, whether it's they'll go more to tight end early on or whatever. They'll figure it out by the end of the year and be there at least to have a shot.
And I think that's what great quarterbacks do. You talk about Buffalo, and hey, a lot of concerns about who's outside there.
Love him.
But I love Josh Allen, and I think with Curtis Samuel, having spent time with Joe Brady, investing in this kid from Florida State who could end up being pretty good, and having those two tight ends and saying, hey, like, we had Brandon Beane on. And I say, what do you say to people that are thinking you guys are going to take a step back because you had to let Stephon Diggs go? Well, the tight ends are who the offense runs through. Yeah. And so if we don't look at a Kincaid as a real weapon, sure, but that's not the way the game's played. You don't take tight ends out of the equation. And I also think there is the unspoken, kind of glossed over increase in production you're going to get out of guys by having a guy like Josh or Patrick in the backfield, and the unknown commodity that is a draft pick, or a Curtis Samuel, who's a veteran guy who's played good football but has never been in a situation like this. So yeah, whether it's Kansas City or Buffalo, as long as you have a guy like that under center, you can be back in those games year after year.
Here's the key with the young receivers in Buffalo, which make it different than just about every place you play, maybe with the exception of Baltimore.
Scramble drill.
Well, it's a scramble drill, but it's also, run blocking.
Yeah.
You're running routes. You got to run the route hard, even though it's a run, and you've got to transition to a run blocker, because the quarterback is such a big part of that offense.
Yeah, no question.
And this young wide receiver who's used to just running routes and maybe doing the obligatory kind of run block, and occasionally if he gets angry, pin somebody. But he's got to change the way he looks at the offense.
Yeah.